Hello, beautiful humans. Ryan Magic here, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. Today's episode is a continuation of the 6 types of fear. Now, if you are listening to this episode, but you didn't see part 1, the solo episode that I did talking about the 6 parts of fear, the first 3, which I'm going to recap in a moment. If you didn't watch that first part, pause this podcast, go back. It's a couple of episodes ago, and watch that first part of the 6 types of fear first, because I give a lot of context setting on what creates fear. This episode is going to be a continuation of what we spoke about last time by talking about the next 3 main types of fear that we experience as human beings. So before I get into the content aspect of this, just a reminder that I do these episodes because I love to serve. I love to be of service. And if you're listening and you're getting value and you're consuming, it fuels me in the most beautiful way to hear from you guys. So I really want to invite you with a big open heart and a big virtual hug to join me over on Instagram and just send me a message so we're connected. I can give you a cheeky stalk and we can actually be connected, and that would be really beautiful. So head over to @the_Ryan_Magic and check me out on there. Send me a little message saying, yo, just about to watch part 2 of the 6 types of fear. Let's go. Now, let's jump into this episode and do a little recap of the first 3 types of fear that we went over. Now, just remember, fear is the only thing that blocks us from living our most fulfilled life. It's the only thing that blocks us from anything that we truly desire in life, which is why it's something that, after studying over $750,000 worth of personal development and learning from what I consider to be the greatest big set of different thought leaders around the world on lots of different areas of life, this is the common thing that I've seen that links all of the blocks across every angle of personal growth. Whether you're looking at more of the healing aspect of growth and you're seeing how fear impacts healing, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, or whether it's just like what blocks people from starting their business, fear. What blocks people from spiritual enlightenment, fear of letting go. So what blocks us from getting anything and everything that we want in life always comes back down to fear. But the reason that people don't spend a lot of time working on overcoming fear is because they are held captive by fear without realizing it. And that's what we call head hypnosis. That's what we spoke about last time, the hypnotic prison of the mind, trance, whatever we want to say. We have the intellect, which is that gatekeeper or that warrior that works on behalf of the head, the fear-driven aspect of our consciousness, and will tell us any belief systems, any stories, any ideas, steer our behavior in any way that it can to have us stay in what it perceives is going to keep us safe, which is, first and foremost, we've gone, all fear is the fear of death. Ultimately, we have the amygdala, the fear aspect of our mind, the reptilian brain, the animal brain, is what Joe Dispenza calls it. It is the part of us that wants us to stay alive, and every animal has it. And it is incredibly influential on our behavior as human beings. So much so that it is 3 times more powerful than the other aspect of our consciousness, which is the heart, which wants us to liberate, which wants us to go into the unknown, that wants us to actualize our dreams. Beautiful aspect of our consciousness. They both are very well-meaning, but the heart is where the fulfillment lies, and the head is where perceived safety lies. And it creates the contrast. It creates the karma. It creates the opportunity for us to grow. If we were already had it all figured out and there was no fear at all, and we're completely fearless, then we would be completely transcended into oneness, and we wouldn't even be having the human experience. However, as human beings on this earth, live in this life, we've got to navigate fear if we want to live our most fulfilled life. So that's why I go so deep into this topic. Anyway, let's summarize what we went through last time. So we understood that we have those two aspects of our consciousness and that we are so driven by fear without even realizing it. We went through some of the science where we have understood that we have ganglia on our that goes along our spinal column, and it houses nerve clusters, of which there are 2.5 to 3 times more nerve clusters in the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system, the fear nervous system, which I group under the consciousness of the head, survival brain. And then that's got 2.5 to 3 times more nerve clusters, more resources in our body that influence our behavior, our hormones, than what the parasympathetic nervous system has in terms of nerve clusters. So it's David and Goliath, head versus heart, love versus fear, fulfillment versus fear. So that's why I want to invite some compassion in here and some understanding as to why we can so easily be in head hypnosis, why we can so easily know what we want, but not do the things towards it. Or for years, have a dream of starting a business, but still stay in that job. For years, know that you're not in the right relationship, the one that is most aligned and fulfilling to you, but still stay there. Why? Because you've got 3 times more resources in your body devoted to keeping you in the familiar than you have devoted to helping you go into the unfamiliar, where the growth and the development and the liberation and freedom and fulfillment is, right? So the fear is a very big pull. It's a very big pull. And the purpose of the previous episode, solo episode that I did, the first 3, also given the context setting, and this one, the reason why I wanted to do these episodes was to give you awareness over the fact that you are being dictated by fear more than you are love. Because without that awareness, you're just in head hypnosis. So the more that you can understand the dynamics that are playing under the surface, the more that you have a window of opportunity to create what you actually want without being led unconsciously by fear. This is a liberation. This is an awakening. This is the opportunity for you to take back leadership of your life, to take that tyrannical, head-based leader off the throne of your decision-making, that fear-driven leader, and bring in the benevolent king or queen or leader, however you want to refer to the most empowered version of yourself, the heart, and put the heart back on the throne of your decision-making. So you're being led by love and not fear. Okay. So in episode 1, we went through the first 3 kind of main types of fear that are all ultimately tied back to the fear of death. But we went through fear of harm, which is fear of losing resources and then starving to death, not having food and shelter. Also fear of physical harm, why we're scared of animals that could kill us, or if we get injured, why that creates fear, or if someone threatened to bash you, why that would start pumping adrenaline and cortisol and really start putting you into the sympathetic nervous system, because we have that programmed into us. We also have programmed into us the fear of change. Anything that's new is a threat, because we don't know what the consequence of an animal that we've never touched before is, or don't know anything about. We don't know if we like, especially back in the tribal days when we're living in the wild, you couldn't just see a new plant and eat it, because it might be poisonous and you might die, right? So we've been programmed to fear the unknown. We don't want to go delving into territories where tribes people of neighboring territory tribes could be there. You might cross boundaries and barriers and get speared to death. Those consequences don't exist now in most places in the Western world. So it's old technology, but nevertheless, it's still programmed into our brain, and it's been that way for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Doesn't suit modern society. The third one, so we have fear of harm, fear of change, and we also have fear of rejection, which is one of the biggest ones, right? Fear of being judged, being disliked. It's that innate desire to want to fit in, be accepted by the tribe, because if you're not and you get ousted from the tribe, your survival is massively in jeopardy to be in the wild by yourself. Again, old technology. But we spoke a lot in the last episode. Well, it makes sense why we may struggle to create our dream life if we have these fears programmed into us. It makes sense why you feel like you're going to die if you do something in public, or you try to do a sales call, or you're going to tell everyone about your new business. It makes sense, right? If you got that fear of rejection programmed into you, that's why you're feeling that. So you're not alone. It's all okay. But we got to learn to navigate it. If not, it's going to continue to hold you back. And if you're starting a business or a career or a path of purpose and service, whether you're a singer, whether you are a poet, whether you are a scientist, whether you are an entrepreneur or a coach or a speaker, whatever your kind of dream path is, you're going to be confronted with those three primary fears, because every stage of the growth of that journey of you pursuing your purpose is going to be new and different. So fear of change, you're going to most likely have to, at some point, take away the security and safety of a standard job, and your finances, which is fear of harm, are going to kick into play. That fear of harm is going to kick into play as your stability is being changed for where you get your resources, which determine food and shelter, right? So that kicks off. And fear of rejection is massive when you're putting your most authentic, heart-led purpose and creations into the world. Massively. So no wonder why you're feeling overwhelmed. No wonder why it's difficult to get your purpose thriving at a massive level, because you think you're going to die every day on the journey to that place, which is why there is no skill that is more important than courage to develop. Okay, so that's the primary three. Today, we're going to talk about the next three, okay, in the 6 types. This is just how I categorize it again, right? So let's go into them anyway. So the first one, which is the most complex one, I'm going to start with that, of this last 3, is the fear of parents. The fear of parents. This could easily be an episode by itself, but I'm just going to talk about it now. I'm going to be thorough but simple at the same time. So the fear of parents is the fear of going against what you were told as a kid under the delusion that you're still dependent upon them for your survival. Okay. Said more simply, as children, we rely on our parents to stay alive. They are our source of safety and survival. And so we have this programming that says, if you want to stay alive, you better be loved by your parents, because if you're loved by your parents, they'll protect you. So when they give us feedback, whether it's direct or just indirectly by what they believe, what they say, what they display with their behavior is and isn't acceptable, what they say is and isn't acceptable in the house, in life, we have a program, like a really complex strategy, which is essentially writing what I got taught when I did a bunch of psychotherapy 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was, is called a survival script. So as a kid, we're listening to whether you get on the couch when you have friends over and you start belting out a song, you start singing Frozen in front of everyone, and your mum's like, "We have company, keep it down." Well, that happens, that one time could be traumatic enough, but if it happens enough, then in the survival script, it says, well, if you want to be loved, you better suppress your expression, right? And that the way that we are stroked positively, negatively, or neutrally by our parents determines our personality in a big way. It's got a big influence on our personality, right? You know, some people are really emotionally unavailable, kind of shut off and cold and logical. Well, they probably weren't allowed to express themselves as children, and that forms their personality. That forms what they write in their unconscious survival script. Deep in their subconscious brain, it says, there's a rule here. The script says, do not express yourself. Okay? If you got told heaps as a kid that, you must look after everybody else. You have to put everyone's needs before your own, and you develop a lot of pleasing qualities, because if you didn't put someone's need before your own, you got told off. That 5-year-old child is listening to mummy telling him or her off, going, oh my gosh, if I don't put other people's needs first, then mummy's not going to love me. And if she doesn't love me, she's not going to protect me and I'm going to die. So that belief system from us as children has a massive impact on what we feel safe to do and not to do as adults, right? This is the survival script. It's how we write our personality. It's not the only impact on our personality, but it is, I would say, the main impact on our personality, our ego, how it develops, who we choose to be in the world. It's massively influenced like this. I call this the fear of parents, okay? Because if you grew up in that house where expressing yourself wasn't okay, then you're going to have a massive fear tied to self-expression in the world. Now, if your dream, your heart's desire is to be a singer, and you had that cut off when you're a child, and you're walking around as an adult, metaphorically speaking, the car of your life, the vehicle of your life, it is the 5-year-old version of you behind the steering wheel, choosing not to express herself or himself, yourself, in a business meeting or at work because daddy yelled at you when you were 5 years old. So it's a 5-year-old that's choosing to behave in that way because someone else that grew up in a household where they were given a lot of positive strokes for self-expression and told that they need to self-express and celebrated when they were self-expressed, developed the personality, the survival script that says on it, if I express myself in a big way, mommy and daddy will love me. And if they love me, they'll protect me and I'll be safe. So another person in the business meeting expresses themselves and speaks up in a big way because that's how they were parented, right? So this is the fear of parents. And this is how your innate ego, the biggest fears that are attached to the way that you have been taught to show up in the world by your parents, is massively influencing what you choose to do and not to do. Like this is where the head, because the fear of parents, your personality is a set of programs that's stored in your head. It's what your intellect will call upon to know what is and isn't okay in the world. So this is very important to know. This is a lot more complex than just fear of rejection as a neutral common undercurrent that every single person shares. This is a complex, customized set of fears that are given to every person uniquely to their upbringings and their childhood. Particularly, and I know most of you guys will know this, but it's important to contextualize this and group it under fear, because it's a fear of parents. Because if you're in that business meeting and you're not speaking up because you're terrified to, beyond the normal fear of rejection, in this case, because when you were younger, it wasn't okay to express yourself. If that's what's happening, or you're out with friends and it's karaoke night, but you, in particular, you really don't want to, you got a big fear, not just the natural nerves and fear, but a really crippling fear where it's like, no, I will not sing. That's not you. Like, you don't have the option to express yourself there, but that's not the situation. The fear there is coming from your upbringing. It's from your parents. It's like you're sitting there scared that you're going to get told off by your parents, but your parents aren't even in the business meeting. Your parents aren't even in the karaoke bar, right? But it's still impacting you. So if you want to go out there and express yourself in the world, you better understand your personality and your ego deeply. Why, like what it is, why it is what it is, so that you can understand the set of programmed fears, the fear of parents, the survival script, your ego personality patterns, and how they show up in your life. Because it's going to allow you to understand when you're in head hypnosis, when you're just living out that safety strategy of your ego, the safety strategy of your survival script, you're just living it out, and it's mega impacting how you show up in the world, most likely blocking your capacity to live your dream life and follow your heart's deepest, truest desires. Is very important to understand. And I'll give you a very simple way that you can do it. Do an Enneagram personality quiz. Enneagram is a personality profiling tool that was actually formed thousands of years ago in the Mayan culture. I didn't know this until I interviewed William Whitecloud, and he told me this, even though I'd already been doing Enneagram for 3-4 years before that interview. And that interview was probably 3 or 4 years ago. This has been around for a long, long time. I kind of get sick of new quiz types and stuff like this. Like, I feel like I've got a pretty solid amount of self-awareness in the way that I show up in the world and why I show up in the way that I do in the world by just attending a ridiculous amount of workshops and having a ridiculous amount of healers, coaches, trainers, teachers, facilitators reflect back who I am, and for me to see myself, observe myself in lots of different contexts. So it gets old. But Enneagram is something that I see as like a real powerful, something that I give credit and props to. Like, I really believe in this personality profiling tool as a super helpful resource. So you just have to type into Google Enneagram quiz, do it, and it'll tell you your primary and secondary aspects to the survival script. You can do it a lot more in depth. I get people to do it a lot more in depth when I work with them in workshops and whatnot. But just for the sake of this podcast that we're on, this being one of 3 types of fear we're exploring, if you want to kind of dive into this and understand how you've been influenced to feel scared in the world from your mother and father's parenting, this is a really key, simple way to access that. So essentially, Enneagram is like 9 types of personality patterns or strategies or safety strategies, ego personality types. And when you do the quiz, it'll tell you what your primary one is, and it'll tell you what your secondary one is. So you go, okay, cool. So the 9, just really quickly, there is the perfectionist is the first one. The second one is, and so I'm going to tell you what it is, and then I'm going to tell you how they feel, what their strategy is for safety in the world. And I'm like pretty solid at Enneagram, but there are people that devote their whole lives to Enneagram. There's books you can read on it and stuff, but I'll give you the summary. First one's the perfectionist. So if you do the quiz and it shows up with perfectionist, it means that you find safety in your physical appearance, looking perfect, sounding perfect, appearing perfect. Like, you got to try to analysis paralysis will feel common to you. The second one is the giver and the helper. And this is like essentially a pleaser. They feel safe making sure that people like them, and they're helping and they're overgiving, attending to everyone else's needs before their own. They feel safe in giving. The achiever is number 3. That's the third Enneagram. That is me. I feel safe if I'm being successful, if I'm being perceived like I'm doing a good job. I don't like receiving feedback in my ego personality type. This is not who someone is. It's a flavor of their personality. So it has a set of strengths. I've got a set of strengths by being someone that's driven, right? But they also come with a set of shadows when they're unhealthily being called upon, especially in times when they feel unsafe. So if someone's feeling unsafe and they're more scared in life, dysregulated, these ego personality types will kick in harder. So if I'm feeling really, really unsafe, I will receive feedback way worse, and I'll want to be doing a good job, and I'll be kind of harsh on myself, and et cetera, et cetera. So I feel safe in achievement, and I don't feel safe in non-achievement. Perfectionist will feel really unsafe in mess and not looking good, and kind of like a bit of OCD around looks, etc. Things being perfect. The giver will feel really unsafe if they're receiving a lot, right? So you can see the opposite will make each of these personality types feel unsafe. This is important to know, because this is how you're tailoring, like, whatever your ego personality type is. This is not, everyone is so different. There are millions of achievers in the world that all have a super complex set of upbringings, lots of different nuances to their personalities, but this just gives you a rough like gist of how you find safety and what triggers fear for you in the world. And this is how you take this fear and just kind of can utilize this one of the 6 fears, the fear of parents, and get a really quick understanding of how it applies to you. The fourth one is called the artist. And the artist Enneagram feels safe being unique. If they are being perceived as non-unique, they feel unsafe. Okay, they want to be different. Enneagram number 5 is what is number 5? Oh man, the name of I've gone blank on it. That's because I'm definitely not this type. The number 5, what it is in layman's terms, because I remember the function, but just don't remember the name, is someone that feels safe in the detail, in the knowledge, in the mechanics, someone that's really head-based, really scientific, really intellectual, really up in their head. And if they're in emotion, they feel usually quite unsafe. Number 6 is the loyalist. The loyalist feels safe following the rules, being dependable, having groups around, etc. They feel unsafe being rebel. Okay. Number 7 is the enthusiast. The enthusiast feels safe in variety and adventure and experiences and feels unsafe in the mundane. 8 is the challenger or the boss. They feel safe being in control, having all the details met, super organized. They're the ones that are calling the shots. Okay. And if they're not, and someone else is leading and it's really disorganized, they'll feel super unsafe. And number 9 is the peacekeeper or the mediator. And they feel really safe if there's no conflict and really unsafe if there's conflict. So they're the 9, right? And that's just a really quick way that you can understand it. So if you just Google Enneagram quiz and just fill any of them in, the one that I prefer is eclectic energies, which I think is on page 2 of Google search. So you've got to go back a little bit. Eclectic energies, Enneagram quiz. But check it out. And that'll give you a quick little snapshot. Okay, based on my upbringing, I've become this person. And just one tip for filling out the quiz, you want to fill it out based on how you, because people can, like I'm an achiever and it was completely overriding me when I was massively addicted to working and addicted to success. And it came above other areas of my life that were important and it was really unhealthy because I wasn't aware of it. With awareness, we can actually navigate the advantages, the strengths of who we are in our essence, in our personalities. But with awareness, we can kind of reroute our behavior when it becomes unhealthy. Anyway, we can change it. Like we can change a little bit over time, but our inherent Enneagrams will be based on our childhood. So if you think back to when you're a teenager or 18 years old, when you're 18 years old, what would you do? Like when you're being asked all the questions, go, when I was 18 years old, if I'm under stress, what do I do? And that'll give you a more accurate, deeper answer as opposed to, okay, when it's all rosy and good and life's okay, what do I tend to do? Because that's not the helpful aspect of this. It's deep down. What are your safety strategies? What happens when you're dysregulated? Anyway, go fill out a quiz, get your response for that, and it'll give you another frame of reference of understanding how your upbringing has determined what you can and can't do in the world based on what your parents told you could and couldn't do in the world, right? That's fear of parents, and it has a massive impact on us, right? So for me, just so you know, like I've done a ton of psychotherapy to learn to love myself without achievement. And that's given me the opportunity to not have my life and my decision-making fueled by fear of not being successful. Because then it made it, for example, it made it harder for me to let go of my business back in the day when it wasn't aligned. I just kept going down that direction, driving the growth, attached to the next goal, attached to the vision. But it wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't the path that I was meant to be on it became irrelevant. It started being aligned and then it became non-aligned. But because my self-worth, my safety was so attached, my survival script told me, you must achieve. And then when it became non-aligned, that fear was still controlling and keeping me in that business, even though it wasn't aligned anymore. So I didn't actually have freedom. My life was being dictated by fear. And without the awareness of that, I didn't have the capacity to shift my life and choose what was aligned because I was being held captive by my fear of parents. It's being held captive by my fear of parents. And if you want to have the freedom to choose what's in your heart and not just be completely owned by your fears, then you've got to understand your fear of parents. All right. Anyway, that's the first one. That's the most complex one. These next two are a lot more simple. So I just wanted to start with the most complex one. Well done. You can take a brain break if you need. Take a few deep breaths. Excuse me. Hopefully that was a little pattern interrupt. Let's go to the next one. They're not really in order. The first three are the primary ones that are super simple. The next three are more healing orientated, because in order to transcend these three fears I'm talking about on this half of this topic, part 2 of the 6 types of fears, you need to do some healing work. All right. The next one, so the second one we're going to explore on this call, on this podcast, is the fear of trauma. The fear of trauma. The fear of trauma. I'm pretty sure that's what I call it. I'm just going to double check that. Yeah. Cool. Fear of trauma. And the fear of trauma is essentially our subconscious mind storing memories of things that caused pain from the past and creating an aversion to them in the present and the future under the perceived threat from the past. So the way that this essentially works is this can happen at any stage of life. This is when someone goes to war and they come back and loud sounds completely jolt them because they think they're back in war in their subconscious mind, right? It's not the same, but these last three are overlapping. Some of these 6 types of fear overlap in different ways, but they're still very nuanced. The fear of parents very much is your ego personality type. It's your entire personality type. Fear of trauma could be completely irrelevant to your personality type. This is just the way that I categorize fears. I've never seen other people talk about the 5 types of fears. I've just made this from scratch, but just to delineate between the different types for the sake of remembering it and understanding it. Fear of parents is very much who you've become based on how you were raised. Fear of trauma is anything intense that happened to you and the way that you now associate differently to those traumatic experiences. So for example, if you were younger and you had like a homeless person while you were in a park try to molest you, I know it's an intense example, apologies, but just like I'm going to use an intense example to really prove the point. And there's a homeless person that was really overweight. It was a man, and he had a massive beard, and it was super traumatic for you. Like he grabbed you and you were kicking and screaming and screaming and screaming, and you thought you were going to die, right? And so the way that this fear works is the intensity of what it deems to be dangerous in the future, what it takes stock of for the future is depending upon the intensity of the experience subjectively. So if someone was 5 and that happened and they thought it was terrifying, the worst thing ever, they thought they were going to die. If it was that intense, they might have a fear of parks in general. Like parks are unsafe. I was in that situation. It happened in a park. Now I'm scared of parks. It was so intense that now I'm scared of parks. I'm scared of men. When I see someone with a beard, I start to feel unsafe in my body. When I see someone any men, I'm afraid of men on a deep level. That's a fear of trauma, a fear of the trauma that happened from the past, dictating how we feel in the world moving forward. Okay. So if someone else though was in that situation and it was similar, but the child kind of wasn't as scared. Maybe he didn't grab, he just kind of like grabbed his hand and walked towards a truck, and then the parents saw you and grabbed you back and nothing happened. And you were just like, oh, it's just some man, there's no big deal. And so subjectively, even though it was a pretty intense thing that was going to go down, and there was a chance that you were going to die, but you didn't know that. So subjectively, you might not have any trauma there, right? If you did get taken by a guy when you were 5 years old, grabbed and stuff, but it scared you, but it wasn't subjectively as bad for you for some reason, then maybe instead of having a fear of parks in general, you're just afraid of people that look very similar to that person. Yeah. But it wasn't scary enough to then extend out the hypervigilance to parks in general, men in general, if you see someone with a beard, etc. So trauma is subjective, and based on the intensity, it determines the level of hypervigilance with environmental cues or triggers from that original trauma impacting how we feel in the present. Okay. So understanding this is a full category of fears. For me, this is relevant because I had like quite a negative experience towards the end of my large business that I ran with 25 full-time staff, several $1 million turnover a year, up to $5 million. And things were like really, really intense in there. And towards the end, I had an employee steal a ton of money, caused a lot of pain, trusted the person. Then there was also some sabotaging that happened in the business, close to $1 million damages. I then turned the ship around, really like revived the business and got it super profit heavy. But that scenario left a little bit of trauma in my association of growing in business, managing a business. So now like I'm rebuilding safety. I'm navigating that stored fear of trauma in my body to be able to thrive in a larger organization again, running a larger organization. And that's important to note and delineate. It is a big factor and a big way that we experience fear in the world is just based on stored perception of pain from the past and potential threat of life in the past. So if you were in a car crash, boom, trauma. You might be afraid of cars. You might be afraid of travel. You might have been on a holiday when you were in a really bad car crash. And then when you got back, you're like, now I have a bit of a fear of traveling. So it's important to understand the big ones here and just understand it in your model of fear that we are being influenced in every moment and feeling certain things in our body based on memories and associations we have to the past, based on fear of trauma. Okay. That's the second one. I would say it's important when it becomes important. I would say fear of parents, understanding your ego personality type and how that influences what you feel safe to do in the world now. Very important to understand that, because it's got a massive impact on how you show up automatically every day. And it's very, very important to understand for you to be able to lead your life, not have your life lead you, and not have your upbringing lead you. Okay. Doesn't mean we change. I believe that the difference between our ego and our soul is the soul is leveraging the strengths of our ego. It just does it with awareness. There's just heart and love filtered throughout it. So for me, my Enneagram is an achiever. My second Enneagram is giver. So I'm essentially a driven nice guy, driven pleaser. And that has a massive impact on how I show up in the world for the positive. For like my soul is someone that's really ambitious, being of service in the world as a coach and a leader, but not allowing my need of other people to like me to stop me being authentic. That's where that giver, it's called the giver or the helper, the second Enneagram that I have within my essence, within my ego, if I'm not aware of it, I will be inauthentic. And I've worked so hard over the last 5 or 6 years to really be authentic. I've worked so hard over the last 5 or 6 years to not need to be driven to feel worthy. but I still have that superpower of stretching myself, of motivation, of drive, of resilience, of challenge, because I spent my whole life trying to prove that I'm good enough by achieving. So that left me with a set of strengths to know that I can do hard things. So I still want to leverage that. That's still part of my purpose. That's my soul's purpose, is being a nice guy, being kind and impact driven and service driven and ambitious. That's how I can be of service, by doing a podcast and writing books and putting on seminars and growing a big business and being inspiring. That's part of my service. If someone was a peacekeeper, number 9, they might be great at conflict resolution and might find themselves in a role of mediation and being of service like that. It's not like you're always then, it's bad to be a peacekeeper. No, it's just bad if you're in a situation and you're feeling terrified every single time there's tension, because you're going to be in conflict all the time in life. So yeah, that's really important. But fear of trauma, it's important when it becomes obvious that there's a problem. Some serious traumatic thing is impacting how you show up in the world. And often this will happen with, if there's sexual abuse, someone may really have trouble with intimacy in their adult relationship, even though their partner is not an abuser. Then it becomes relevant. Then you got to look at your fear of trauma. Okay. Anyway, now we're going to move on to the last one, which is fear of emotion. Fear of, is it emotion or vulnerability? So the fear of emotion, understanding that our head feels safe in the familiar, and it believes that it can stay safe being in control. It can control things. That's when it's safe. Now, our heart believes that growth happens in the unfamiliar, right? That's the difference between our head and our heart. Now, fear of emotions are the opposite of being in control. When you're feeling emotion, it's so unpredictable. It's so unpredictable. Like, especially when we're dealing with deep memories that we have emotions attached to that are big, it can be really scary to feel. And I'm just going to say most people in society, this society, are suppressed emotionally. Most people are suppressed emotionally. There's a whole modality created around this, internal family systems, which is parts work. And the theory is that there are 3 types of parts. There are protectors, there are addictions, and protectors and addictions essentially try to stop us feeling the painful, exiled, vulnerable parts underneath. So, in other words, if we start to feel really sensitive at work and we're all frustrated and angry and someone's cranky at work, that frustration, that's a protector. And addiction is the other one. So there's protectors and addictions. And if emotions start to boil up in anyone, because emotions are really scary to feel, our head will either go, cool, what's something addictive we can do to shift our sensory experience and distract away from the feelings that are coming up? So if you are scrolling on Facebook because you're feeling sad, it's a distraction. It changes the sensory experience. Oh, I got a new like. Oh, that's really funny. Oh my gosh, whoa, did you see that video? That reel was crazy. Or emotional eating, binge eating sugary foods, or really salty foods, or takeout, or whatever it is. Overeating changes our sensory experience and distracts away from the emotions rising up underneath. So our fear of emotion is massive. This is a massive one. We all have fear of emotion on some level, because when we're feeling emotion, we're vulnerable, right? Especially vulnerable emotions. If we're feeling the emotion of anger, that's a safety strategy. Oftentimes, under anger is usually sadness or grief or shame, which is embarrassment, right? Deep embarrassment for who we are. So understanding this type of fear, the fact that we fear emotions, and it massively dictates how we show up in the world. Remember, I said that the enemy to fulfillment and your dream life, the only thing that blocks us is fear. Well, we have fear of rejection, we have fear of losing money, we have fear of not being liked, we have fear of change and new things, but we have fears of not adhering to the survival script of our parents. We have fears of past traumas, but we also have fear of feeling, because we are massively out of control when we feel. And our body will do anything to avoid those uncomfortable feelings because it perceives that we're vulnerable, and that if we're vulnerable, that could lead to death. So fear of emotions is a massive one. It is overlapping with fear of rejection, because when we're feeling we could get rejected or judged in our emotions, our vulnerability, it's not culturally acceptable to share all of our emotion in the Western world. It just isn't. And so everyone battles with fear of emotions pretty much, unless you've done a crap ton of healing work. But if I went into a mixed martial arts gym where people are beating the crap out of each other, and then I just knew each of their most vulnerable, shame-filled secret, like this person was molested by their uncle. This person has really insecure about their genitals. This person cheated on their ex-partner and has never told anyone about it. This person got teased and bullied as a kid and called this particular nickname. And I pull on the soft spot of all these fighters. None of them would feel safer experiencing their emotions. They'd feel more safe being in a fight and getting their head beaten in, right? The fear of emotion is massive. In internal family systems, that modality of coaching, which is parts work, the 3 categories of parts: protectors, which could be I was telling that story earlier, getting really aggressive at work. Why is Janet so angry today? She's just being grumpy and angry. There's emotion that she's afraid to feel. And it's a protector coming out to distract away from the feelings. When she's feeling angry, it's deflecting all of the vulnerability. If she's angry, she's in control, it's all good. And the actual deep grief of her father that's passing away from cancer that she hasn't told anyone about is getting stuffed down, because that protector's coming to stop the emotions coming to the surface. And also, she's binge eating a bunch of picnics, a bunch of chocolate bars, to use that to also shift the sensory experience away from those emotions that are trying to come up, right? So everyone experiences, pretty much in the Western world, fear of emotions. Everyone experiences fear of emotions. And in that internal family systems modality, with the addictions, the addictions are formally known as firefighters, and they're more of a put out the fire, like there's emotion coming up, do something now. And people, that's where drug abuse, I just think addictions is easier to remember, like understand what it is. Firefighters is kind of like a bit more complex. But addictions, like people will do drugs to avoid feeling certain things, and they'll get trashed to avoid the feeling of the emotions. People will self-harm to avoid the feeling of the emotions. Yeah, that's how big fear of emotions is. The ultimate firefighter or addiction, I call firefighters addictions, but this doesn't really make sense in my labeling, but that's okay, is suicide. Is a firefighter. The emotions are so intense. The person is so afraid to feel all those feelings that they end their life. They literally end their life because they'd rather do that than feel the discomfort that's underneath that they haven't felt. And they would rather die than feel that pain underneath. Emotional pain. So if I went to a gym, fighters gym, they're all fighters, it'd be way easier for them to smash the crap out of each other than it would to be to cry in front of the other guys. Fear of emotion is massive. It is massive, and it massively influences how we show up in the world. So the reason that that's an important fear to understand is because it hugely impacts how we show up in the world. If you've got an addiction to TV shows, like if you want to pursue your dream, right? And you know that there's something you need to do. You need to tell people you're going to launch this business, or tell people about your upcoming single that you've been working on. You're a singer. And you're feeling really, really nervous of getting rejected. And then addictions will come in, right? And as one of those like coping strategies to shift the sensory experience. So having the fear of, if sadness is present, it's super important to understand that if we don't learn to feel safe in our emotions, we block connection and intimacy, which is one of the biggest access points to fulfillment. One of the most fulfilling aspects of being a human is connecting with other people. Because when you're oneness, you already are everything. When you're separate as a human, you get to connect back with other people and see oneness in somebody else and be liberated in love through that experience, which gets blocked by fear of emotions. Because in order to be able to see deeply and experience intimacy, you need to be able to be seen deeply. In order to be able to be seen deeply, you need to be seen in all of you, not just the highlight reel. This is why people's intimacy and connection and relationships are suffering. Divorce rates are higher than ever, because the more that we connect with social media, the more that we disconnect to authenticity, because the more that people are trying to be liked and use their fear of, the more of that fear of rejection is impacting the inauthenticity of what people express to people in person and online. So we're looking everywhere and seeing everyone's highlight reels. And guess what? We're not able to connect deeply and intimately in relationships. So fear of emotions blocks intimacy. It blocks connection. It blocks connection. And so understanding that being able to have courage to live our most fulfilling life, which is the purpose of life, is fulfillment. The purpose of life is not achievement. The purpose of life is not just connection. The purpose of life is fulfillment. And that is having the highest consistent quality experience in which different things are needed to access that in every moment in life. So it's a constant discerning game of what do I need now? But I can tell you, connection is one of the biggest access points to fulfillment. Purpose is also a really big access point to fulfillment. But fear of emotions massively blocks one's ability to live their most fulfilled life. And people will do almost anything to avoid feeling. So in order to, like, I run a workshop called the Art of Courage workshop. In it, I also talk about healing and emotional work, because one of the biggest ways that fear, like head hypnosis, one of the biggest fuels behind head hypnosis, tightening its grip behind that aspect of your consciousness that's dictating your actions from fear, is birthed in the fear of avoiding and feeling, the fear of feeling emotion, therefore having you avoid. Avoidance comes from the fear of emotions. We want to avoid certain situations. We will check out by scrolling, binge eating, watching porn, having sex, like more than what you would if you were just connected to your heart. Any addictive tendencies, addictive cleaning, addictive working, it all comes from the fear of feeling. And one of the feelings, one of the emotions, guess what that is? Is fear. One of the emotions that we're afraid to feel is fear. And that's a part of learning to be courageous, to feel fear. Anxiety, fear, because at some level, we perceive that if we feel vulnerable things, we're either going to be judged, we're either going to be vulnerable and potentially be more susceptible to being injured, hurt, and we're leading towards the fragility of death. And so we have a massive fear of emotions, which also ties into fear of death. But I had to separate it. You could technically say it's fear of rejection, but it's such a massive one that it needs its own category, because the antidote to that is very different to the antidote to the fear of rejection by itself. Making a sales call and being afraid that someone's going to say no, it's kind of different to the fear of feeling the shame and grief from in front of your partner. So they need their own category. That is the third of today's episode. That's the sixth, technically, fear. We have fear of harm, protection, survival, like food and shelter, being physically hurt. We have the fear of rejection. We have the fear of change. We have the fear of parents, whether going against our innate personality and our ego, the way that we've been told we should show up in the world. If we don't, we feel scared. Even though our parents aren't there to tell us off, it still impacts us massively. And it has us make decisions reactively to that conditioning. Fear of trauma, anything painful in the past that our nervous system says, I'm going to avoid that in the future. And therefore, you don't go and experience things that may be aligned for you, may be access points to fulfillment for you, but you can't do it because your body's trying to avoid that thing because it experienced pain in an environment where that trigger was there. Now you feel scared even though you're not back in that situation. That's an important one. And then lastly, fear of emotion, fear of the vulnerability of feeling. And that is arguably the biggest one. That is, and it blocks. Now, this is what I'm going to go as far to say. They're all very impactful on how we show up in life. It's all very impactful on our level of fulfillment. But the one that blocks our fulfillment more than any of them, I would say, is fear of emotion. And the reason why is the antidote to, or the strategy that our body, our mind, our head uses to avoid feeling emotion has such a detrimental impact on our lifestyle. Because if there's unexpressed emotion and you don't have the capacity to feel openly and honestly and regulate your emotions, then and recognize when there's suppressed emotion present in your system that's impacting your behavior, if you don't have solutions for that, then addiction sets in. Short-term gratification becomes one of the key areas to avoid feeling. So if you're finding like in your life, you're watching a lot of Netflix, you're eating unhealthy, you're not moving as much, you're watching porn, you're scrolling more than you want to, the origin of that behavior is most likely fear of emotion. There's most likely something that's being avoided emotionally in your system that you haven't recognized that is having you distract away from that, the perceived pain that is attached to that emotion you haven't felt. And that is determined that, like, if you're always short-term gratification and addiction, simply, it's completely blocking fulfillment. You're not present in those moments. You're the opposite of it. There's presence, and then there's, let's just say, distraction, right? If we want to experience our most fulfilling life, which looks like primarily being present in whatever it is that's needed to be most fulfilled, whether it's working on your purpose or it's doing some practices that support you or it's spending time in nature, presence is the litmus test to know that you are in your heart, to know that you are in fulfillment, that you're living a fulfilled experience, a high quality experience. And avoiding emotion, having unexpressed emotion and not having the capacity to express it completely blocks your capacity to be present, because the strategies that come in to avoid feeling all massively take us out of the present moment. Binge eating. If you're eating sugar, smoking, addiction, drugs, alcohol, completely taking us out of the present moment, massively. And that has a spiraling effect, because then your nervous system's capacity is less. You get triggered more easily. The emotion wants to come up even more. And then the safety strategies kick in even harder. The addiction ramps up. And then because you're doing the addictive tendencies, you're less healthy, in other words. And because you're less healthy, your nervous system can hold less, which means the emotion's coming up even more, which means you need even more addiction to block it. And it's a nasty spiral that we've all been in at some point in our lives, and most likely experience in some level in like every year, month, week, or day. But those are the 6 types of fear. And I'm communicating this with a lot of intensity because A, I'm tired as I'm filming this, but B, because I honestly believe that understanding how much of a hold fear has on us is like step 1 a massive, epic step one to just going from wherever you are right now to your most courageous, fulfilled, epic life that you could ever live. Yeah. This is step one, realizing how fear is stopping you. Because the moment that you get access to courage, all of a sudden, everything becomes possible. Think of it like this. If your comfort zone, what's in your comfort zone is what's possible for you to do, right? Makes sense. If you are in business and you don't feel comfortable hiring people, you can't expand, right? Can't do that, can't expand. So you're limited by that. You're limited by your comfort zone. If you're in business and you're uncomfortable spending over $100,000 in ads, you're limited. You're not going to be able to get past $1 million revenue or whatever it is, right? You're limited by your capacity to spend money. That's your comfort zone. You've got a fear of spending money. So your comfort zone doesn't include spending money. So you're limited by that. If you're afraid of putting yourself out there, well, you can't do a bunch of things that are going to grow the business. So you're limited by that. Comfort zone doesn't have self-expression, massively limited. If you don't have the capacity if you don't have writing books in your comfort zone, you're limited because you can't write books. You can't use that strategy. If selling isn't in your comfort zone, well, you're limited, right? So anything that we are afraid of completely limits us. But I want you to get this. This is a more intense, even more intense. That if you imagine, metaphorically speaking, a circle drawn on a page, and inside the circle is written comfort zone, and it contains all the things you already know how to do. You've done a bunch of times. You feel confident with it, comfortable with them. Anything outside that you don't feel comfortable yet, you don't have the capacity to do those things yet because they're outside your comfort zone. But get this. There is let's say the circle in the middle is like shaded in red. Then there is a really subtle light red, like there's a bigger circle round the comfort zone that's like, let's just say it's got a diameter of 10 centimeters, the circle. Then another 5 centimeters further out, there's another bigger circle with a slightly, like a real light faded light red that's there. And that's not your comfort zone. That's just your zone of perceived possibility. Because your comfort zone is essentially what you can do. This second circle that's like, you've got a limit for what you perceive as possible for you, what you can even think of. And this, like, let that land for a second. Fear doesn't just determine what you can do. It determines what you even believe is possible for you. And the limits are pretty massive, right? Like Elon Musk has got a pretty massive comfort zone. And he believes a lot's possible. He believes he can colonize Earth on Mars. That's pretty freaking big belief, right? Now, if you don't, but let's like say you've got a massive fear of money, you might not even perceive it's possible for you to have $1 million business. That's scary to me. You don't have to have $1 million business to be fulfilled, but it's so limiting to not even think it's possible for you, to not even perceive it as a possibility. That second circle that goes around the comfort zone is just the zone of possibility. That's the comfort zone. And then there's the zone of possibility. That's what we're going to call it. This is not a documented model. I was thinking about this earlier today. But you can't even think past a certain distance away from the comfort zone. You hit a certain distance, then you can't even conceive that things are possible for you. That to me scares me. That really, really, that scares me. And I want you to let that land for a second. And I can tell you, by facilitating a crap ton of people around fear and doing fear workshops and getting people to do fear challenges and doing a crap ton of fear challenges myself, social experiments, doing stand-up comedy with my shirt off, impromptu on a table in a food court in Melbourne Central in front of hundreds of people, and just crazy stuff like this to try to see what happens in my body and just try to challenge myself to transcend fear. It didn't happen. Fear still came back because fear of rejection doesn't go anywhere. But I've got a lot of experience. And whenever I've asked people to write down the craziest things for their dream life, what people write down are so limited. It literally, I've seen it over and over again. There's 1 in 10 people, or even less. I'm not exaggerating. I'm being 100% legit. There's 1 in 10% or less of people that even can, like that zone of possibility that extends very far. Most people, what they write down for their dream, the big thing is super limited. Because the point that I'm trying to get here is fear doesn't just stop your action. It stops your capacity to dream. It stops your capacity to believe. It does. It's got a bigger impact than what you believe that it does. Hopefully you're starting to feel the level of intensity that this topic, the hold that fear can have over you. Head hypnosis is the thing. Pretty much everyone's in it. And you get to jump out of that by this access point of this podcast. We're now flirting with possibility. Your zone of possibility will extend and expand as you start to tackle fears and go past them and create new opportunities for yourself. So I could talk about fear for many hours, and I literally have a workshop on it that I'm going to sell you on, and I bloody hope that I can sell you on it, because it will transform your life. It will transform your life more than any other workshop. I don't care if it's $100,000 business mastermind with Tony Robbins. This workshop will be more valuable because it doesn't matter what you know about business. Your comfort zone is going to determine what you can do. And it's also going to indirectly determine your zone of possibility, which even determines what you can dream of. So the information won't even register as a possibility because it gets filtered out by the intellect, which is dictating and controlling the head hypnosis. Fear is the thing that stops you. Stop learning new things. We've got to be able to take what you already have. And that's what happened to me. I was 21 years old. I'd been in business for 3 years, and I had a multi-six-figure business, but I was massively staying in my comfort zone. And the moment that I was able to realize that I was being held back by fear, the moment I was being able to realize that it was determining my actions, I literally stopped learning. I was like, I know enough. I've known about ads for years and I've never run one myself because I'm scared of doing it because of the fear of change and fear of rejection. I've wanted to speak for years, but I've never put on a seminar because I'm terrified of being rejected. And the moment that I realized that, I said, stuff this, I'm stopping learning. And I didn't learn anything for 3 years. I just used what was common sense within me. And I went from zero in a brand new passion, because I was doing a digital agency before that. That didn't light me up at all. It was just a way to try to be successful. Even though I had some financial success with it, my dream was to be a speaker. And I stopped learning. I used my own common sense and I went with it. And I built a multi-million-dollar business over the next few years without learning anything because the answers were within me. It was easy what I had to do. I had to just say I was going to run a seminar to start. It's not that complicated. I put it on Meetup. I told a bunch of people about it. I didn't need to do a seminar or a course on how to run seminars. I knew where to start. And then I wanted to get good at Facebook ads. Instead of like learning about it, I just ran a Facebook ad, and then I got good at it by doing over 100 of them. And I spent over $1 million in ads, made over $10 million through ads. Yeah. Through common sense. You've got enough intelligence within you. You don't need to learn. You need to understand how to navigate fear. And I would love to support you with that. Come along to the Art of Courage workshop. It is not a hype fest. It is a grounded, heart-centered, fulfillment-driven way to approach fear. It's the solution that will liberate you over time to know that you are the leader of your life and your heart is more powerful than you can ever believe. Your dreams are possible and they're guaranteed if they're really genuine in your heart. So come along to the Art of Courage workshop. I'm going to do lots of different podcast episodes. I'm going to be doing a solo episode a week, but there is not going to be a topic that I do that is more important than part 1 and 2 of the 6 types of fear. Okay. I would love to support you to overcome fear. Yeah, you're still going to feel it. It's not going anywhere. You have that aspect of your consciousness that's survival driven, your survival brain, the head. And guess what? You need to learn to navigate it. And so it's a 3-day super intense experience. Super intense meaning I'm covering the amalgamation of the $750,000 plus of courses that I've done, workshops I've done, mentors I've had, retreats I've been on, books I've read, 15 years in personal development into one system that integrates the spiritual layer of reality, the mental and emotional layer of reality, and the material layer of reality. AKA, how do you have deep inner peace while also becoming really well off financially, doing your purpose, while also having deeply connected relationships, while also having a deep self-worth? I really integrate these into this system. It's called the core method. That's what I'm teaching. And I would love to support you with that. It's the most valuable thing I've ever created in my entire life. And I'd love for you to be there, to overcome fear and learn to be the leader of your life. Wow, I'm tired. And I literally am about to walk out of this room and get a massage from my beautiful partner. So I am running slightly late for that. So I'm going to jump off here. RyanMagic.com. You'll be able to see when the next Art of Courage workshop is on my website, RyanMagic.com. If you've got questions, please ask me. I trust in divine alignment. If you ever ask me a question and you don't align for the workshop, I would prefer you to not come if it's not aligned. And if it is aligned, then come. But I'm not attached to you being there. That's a lie. I'm kind of attached to you being there. I really believe this is the answer because it shifted my life so much. But you are the leader of your life. Your heart knows. So if you're feeling that call to be there, check out more information about it and let me know. Let me know. If you don't want to do the workshop or you do want to do the workshop regardless, if something in this episode kind of touched you or you got a specific learning from it, please let me know and just shoot me a message on the gram at the Ryan Magic. Sending you so much love. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of day. Honoring you so much for being here and getting through this because I'm talking real talk and most people do not delve into these topics. Awesome. You're on the fast track to your dream life and your most fulfilling life. Good on you. Love you guys. Peace out. And I'll see you in the next episode.